Welcome back to Fixing Furniture. I've got a project here where I've got a chair that's got a number of problems with it. I'm going to show you how I take it apart, repair it, and get it back into working order. But we're also doing a competition here on YouTube. I'm competing with AT Restoration and John's Furniture Repair to see how many likes our videos can get in the first 7 days. So I'm going to rely on you to give us a like. I'll leave a link to the other 2 videos as well so you can check them out. We're all working on chairs that have some significant problems, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy all 3 videos.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
The front rail here, you can see this has been broken off.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
The customer brought us this chair because it's got a broken leg. But as I looked closer at the chair, I realized this isn't just a straightforward repair. Unfortunately, the customer had taken it to a repair shop and they had used polyurethane glue. That's something you should not be using. There are also some other questionable things that were done here, obviously not by someone who understands furniture repair. I'm going to show you what not to do when repairing a chair, and I'm going to show you how to do this right. Let's take a look at all the parts. I'll start by turning this upside down, and we can take a look at the legs. This is where the leg broke off. When you've got a break like this that's got split grain, this is a great gluing surface if it mates well to be able to get some strength. But when wood breaks across the grain like this, there's no strength at all when you glue that back together. So basically about 1/4 of this is all that would be attached here, and that's just not strong enough for a chair leg. The solution here is to make a whole new turning on the lathe, and in order to do that, I need to take this apart. But here's where one of the first problems comes in. You see there's some yellow residue here and here and here. Polyurethane glue should not be used on chairs because it can't be reversed. There's no way for me to undo this. So I may have to cut off all 4 legs here and turn 4 legs to get this chair back in working order. There's more evidence here that this person didn't know what they were doing. There's a screw here in the leg, and screws should never be put in the legs of chairs. And here, there's supposed to be a wedge holding the back of the chair on, and there isn't a wedge. This chair will fall apart. So this wasn't a repair shop that knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, I've got a lot of repair work here to do. I also noticed at the top of the chair here, where these brackets are, there's some glue residue here, so this is polyurethane glue. And we've also got Robertson screws. These should be slot head screws, so these were changed over at some point. Furniture repair and restoration work really is about identifying and solving the right problem. So I'm going to turn this upside down, and hopefully I don't have to do too much damage to get this chair apart. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a spreader clamp. So this is just a clamp, flipping the other end here. If you're interested in looking at clamps, I've got a buyer's guide to purchasing these. So let's see if that one seems like it's on there pretty well. I'll try the one that's broken here. Let's see what happens. I'll have to go in here. Yeah, it's pretty solid. Okay, I'm going to start by taking out the screw here, because eventually this is going to have to come out one way or the other. Throw that out. I've got metal recycling here, so I'm making use of the waste metal. Yeah, I'm not sure that these are coming apart. So what I'm going to do now is use a mallet. And I don't like using a mallet in a lot of cases just because it can cause damage, but I've got damaged parts here anyway. Oh, that's loose. Okay, let's try this side. Huh. I did not expect that. Now that I see these joints coming apart, I think I understand why there's polyurethane glue in this chair. Some people mistake that the polyurethane, because it foams up, can really help add strength if you've got a loose joint. But that's not the case. That foam has no strength at all. So I think there were probably 3 joints here that were loose, and the person repairing this thought the polyurethane had to fix it. but that's not the right thing to do. So I'll take this apart. There's probably a few loose joints here. I'll show you how to tighten them up properly before putting this back together. To get these back legs out, what I need to do is take the front legs out of the mortise first here, because these ones come out at an angle. The front legs will just prevent them from coming out. So with these now loose, let's see. Wow, that's pretty solid there. That one's moving a little bit. Let's see if I can knock this loose. Yeah, you see, the polyurethane did nothing to hold that in place. Now for the last leg, I need to wiggle it. It's in there pretty good. What I'm doing is adding white vinegar here. This will break down the protein if this is hide glue, and it will help loosen up PVA glue if that's what's in this joint as well. I'll leave it for 5 minutes and see what happens. You can see here the vinegar's gone inside the joint, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to add more vinegar and let it sit a little bit longer. To help get that vinegar deep into that joint, what I'll do is just move this in a circular motion, and I can see some movement, so it's already starting to loosen up. I've let this sit for a few more minutes, so what I'll do is now take a spreader clamp, put it between the chair and the stretcher here, and see if I can jack this out. So I can feel this and I can tell that it's sticky, and that means that it's hide glue that was here. And that's one thing I want people to understand is when you're putting furniture back together again, these joints need to be put together with hide glue, because vinegar can reverse the glue and you can take them apart. If these were put together with polyurethane and all the parts and they were tight fitting, there's no way I would get these apart. And that's how I priced it out for the customer, anticipating I'd have to cut off each leg and then turn each leg, put it all back together again. So this will be much less work, less costly for the customer. The next step is to label all these pieces, pull them all apart so I can turn a new leg. In my recent workshop tour video, I showed behind the scenes here. This is where I keep the labels for labeling furniture. So what I do is just take them off here. This is the front right. And just put it on here. I've got a back right, put it on here. So this allows me to quickly do this without having to create labels every single time. Now I'm really curious to see how loose this back is. Oh yeah, look how loose that is. Oh, I'll set that aside for later. That definitely was not a good repair shop that did work on this. Now, as I try to pull this apart, this is the leg I need to get out, and it's loose right here. But if we look over here, you can see there's some residue from some polyurethane glue, and I suspect there's a little bit there as well. So I put a clamp in between these to try and spread them apart, and nothing's moving. So I'm hoping I can put some vinegar in here to get this leg free. So I've got 2 clamps on this now to pull it out in a way that it's parallel, and it looks like it's starting to move. Oh, but it's taking a fair bit of force. I'm going to have to stand this up. Okay, so if I stand it up like this, let's see if I can use the mallet to knock it loose. Oh, this clamp got loose. There we go. Okay, so that's one side loose. Now I have to get the other side loose, but I'm seeing more polyurethane glue here. So I'll try these 2 joints here to see if I can get this apart, because I need to get this off apart here, and then I need to get these off so I can work on this leg. So these parts are starting to separate. This is where I put the vinegar, but here where the polyurethane is, this one's coming apart. So I'll take a closer look at that, but oh, you know what? Maybe it's just on the surface. They didn't load up the joint properly. when I glue this chair together, I'll show you how to put glue in properly so these joints will hold. I'll need to inspect all these joints to make sure that they're strong and they're going to hold. So these two are locked in. These look like they have polyurethane in them, so those ones are okay. These ones here, oh, I can actually feel movement in them. So it looks like these ones weren't originally taken apart. They might just tap apart. Let's see. No, they need a little bit of vinegar. Sometimes when you end up with a joint here, it might feel a little bit loose, but it doesn't want to come apart. Again, if you put the vinegar in the joint, what that does is it loosens everything that's holding it up in there, and then you'll be able to pull them apart. So what I'll do is take the rest of this apart, and then we'll look at the turning. Sometimes people ask me if it's really worth repairing chairs. In this case, the customer has been collecting some chairs over a number of years to get a set of 8. They finally have that set of 8, but unfortunately this leg broke. So the plan here is to repair this chair, and they're going to paint all those chairs a black color so that they blend and they're similar to use at a large table. So it's an important chair for them. It's really up to the customer to decide the value of a repair. Now, to duplicate a turning, what I need is this pattern to work with. So I'm going to take this leg and glue it together. Now, I don't need this to be strong at all, so the quickest way for me to do this is with CA glue. So just a matter of putting some CA glue here, putting on some activator, and this will be dry in seconds. Duplicating a part on a lathe like this can be very challenging. It's one thing to create something from scratch, but when you're duplicating something, you need to make a lot of measurements. And I'll show you what I mean. The last person that repaired this chair replaced the spindle, and you can see by the turning here, they didn't quite get the details right. You can see in these turnings here, there is a variation, but this one just seems to be a little bit too high. And up here, we don't have the right shape here. So I'll see if I can change that, lower this a little bit to get it in line with these, and make it look like part of the family. I'll label all the parts on this poor chair, take it apart, and we'll get it back in a better condition and get it ready for the customer so they can paint it black and have a whole set of 8 chairs that they'll have for their large table. Now if you watch this side, look how much that moves. And on this side, it's not moving. This is where the wedge is missing in the chair back. This is an essential part to keep a back on a chair. So that's missing. I need to drill out the other one to get this apart, but we'll get that fixed up as well. So this spindle here needs some vinegar to loosen it up, but I also noticed there's a splinter that's out here, so you can see how it's different than this side, so I'll need to repair that as well. While I'm waiting for this glue to break down, I just got a notification. Transcend Furniture Gallery is joining us on this chair restoration challenge. So give us a thumbs up, check out the other videos as well. Now that I have the spindle side by side, you can see how far off these measurements are. Now this is where the bottom of the seat is. So if I were to seat this a little bit deeper into the seat, all of a sudden we've got some good alignment. But up here, we still have a difference in the profile, so I'll have to put that on the lathe and fix that. I've now got the 2 pieces I need to work on the lathe, and it's sitting right here. If you'd like to learn more about my workshop, I did a workshop tour, and you can also see some of the YouTubers in this competition. We talk on Zoom, so you can see some of the tips from their workshops as well. When working on a lathe, it's important to always work with sharp tools. So that's where I'm going to start. I'll clear off the workbench here, sharpen my tools, and we'll start turning. Every time I turn, I now use my prototype for clean lathe. This is a dust collection system I'm developing that hopefully will be on a product on the shelf someday. This is something that really helps keep a lathe clean. It captures the dust right at the cutting action, and you can see here, it really does do a great job at pulling things in. So I've now roughed this out to a round. This is 20 inches long. This is a piece of birch. And look at how little dust is out here. If we look at the floor, there's barely anything. I don't have anything on me at all. So this is something that doesn't exist in the market today, and I'm hoping I can get it on the shelves of all woodworking stores. Let me show you how I duplicate a turning. What I do is I've got a reference point here. So I line this up, and what I want to do is mark a couple of sections here where I'm going to take some measurements. So here's a high point on the turning. Here's another high point on the turning. That's probably the same width all the way around here. I'll get to those in a minute. But essentially what I need to do is take this measurement and duplicate that measurement here, 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 and here. And that gives me the first measurement. Now take my calipers and I measure this area. So what I want to do is get that just to the same dimension as the turning. And I'm going to take that measurement and turn it on the lathe here so I get that dimension right. So I know this point right here is the thickest part of the turning. So I'll work this down to that dimension and then I'll take some more measurements. I now know I have the right dimension for here and here, so here I'll make another mark so I can get this dimension right and this one over here as well. I now come back in and mark the high points. So this is my reference. And then I mark the low point as well. So this is where this line right here, I want to work into that V. So again, mark the high point, here and here, and then mark the low point. So these are the low points here that I want to get dimensions on. And that's my high point to work towards. So I just need to darken these lines here and then get my dimensions. So I've got this profile here, but before I get to narrowing down this tenon, what I want to do is work on this end. So I'll mark the low points and the high points here, do the turning and get that ready, then I can cut the tenon. Now, wood turning is one of my newer skills in the workshop. I've taken a few classes on how to do this, and I've gotten some experience with different tools. But the one tool that I fear the most is the skew chisel. That's the one I've got here. The skew is great for making these flat areas on a turning. You can also use it in very versatile ways. But it's something that I fear because I've used it a number of times and messed up turnings. And when you mess up a turning, you typically have to start from scratch again. So I just use it very, very carefully. So I'll go across this and just skim off the surface, get it as flat as I can to avoid what's called a catch. Let's look at that again. That's a piece of wood coming off the turning. Let's take a look at it in slow motion. I put the chisel end down and took out a chunk. Good thing this is going to be painted because I can fix that with wood filler. I'm now ready for sanding, and I like using this multi-pack here. I start with the 150 grit, then the 240, then the 320, then the 400, and that allows me to work through getting a nice smooth turning. But it's important not just to hold it underneath here. Once you're done, rub it this way with the grain, and that gets rid of some of those marks. I'll show you as I go through. So here you can take a look at the turning and how it's matching the details. I did get it a little bit off right here. It's not quite symmetrical, but I think once those legs are apart, you're not even going to notice that. The next part is to drill these holes. So there's 2 on this side, 2 on this side. This is what I find the tricky part. So let's move on to that. I've pushed the legs up against the back of my workbench here, and this allows me to estimate where these holes are going to be. So I just need to mark them off here and here. And now I'm going to drill these 2 holes, figure out where the stretchers are going to be, and then I can rotate it and figure the orientation for these 2. So now I need to bring these parts back in. You can see why I labeled them. So this is the front right here. These go in at this point, and hopefully this is going to be 90 degrees to make my job easier. So let's see. Yep, we're at 90 degrees here. So that one's okay. It's you can see these back ones that are splayed. These ones are more difficult to drill just because you need to find the right angle. And if you do come across a situation like that, a T-bevel is the tool you use to figure out the center of the turning and then the center of the stretcher, and that gives you the angle that you need to drill the hole on. I set this up in a little jig here. It's just 2 45-degree pieces of wood, but because this leg is tapered, it's skinnier at the bottom than it is at the top. If I put it here, it's actually on an angle. So I want a parallel reference surface with the workbench. I'll get that lined up. And then when I drill the hole, I'm going to be looking at this, making sure I've got a vertical angle on the drill to get them in there. Now, it's important that I drill them in the middle, and I think that was part of the problem with this here. So you can see this was drilled off center, so the leg would have been much weaker here than over here. So that might have contributed to why this piece broke in the first place. So you also notice that the bottom of the hole is flat. So I'm using Forstner bits here, and these are drill bits that allow you to drill that flat bottom hole. So it's important you're using the right tool for the job. I set up a square here on the end and a square here, and that will allow me to use them as guides as I'm drilling this hole to make sure I'm straight this way and this way. I've also got this clamped, so after I drill this hole, I can move on to this one without fear of it rotating slightly. I'll use calipers here to check the depth of my hole. I want to make sure it isn't too deep. When I look at this piece here, you can see that the mortise went a fair ways into the leg, and look how deep it is. There's not much wood at the end. So what I want to do is aim for half of the dimension of the leg here, so I'm not compromising the strength of this new chair leg. Okay, so these will line up here. Now, I do have glue residue on these, and I do need to trim the tenons a little bit. I'll show you up close. So you can see the glue residue, and also that's the length of the hole that I drilled. So I do have to shorten that tenon a little bit, and also leave a little bit of room for glue. I'm also beveling the edge of the tenon, because if I've got a square edge like this, that could push the glue to the bottom of the hole. But by putting a bevel on it, like this, if there's glue on the side of the hole, it'll encourage it to come up the side of the tenon here. I'll show you my gluing technique when I'm ready to put this together. Okay, we'll test fit the parts here before we put glue on them. See how they fit. I think they will go together there. It's a little bit tight on this one end. Okay, so that's going to work. Now they've got these pieces in. Next, I have to drill the holes for this portion of the chair. So I'm going to dry fit this together, but there's all kinds of glue residue on these pieces and in the mortises as well. So I need to clean these off first, and then I can make sure they go together a little bit easier. Essentially what I'm trying to do is figure out where these pieces have to come up so I can mark the holes and I can figure out what angle they need to be on. Here's an example of the inside of a mortise. You can see the glue at the bottom of the hole there. That needs to come out so I can put this back together again. The best way to clean this out is to put my drill in reverse and back it into the hole. That way I'm not cutting the sides. Okay, so now it's at the bottom of the hole. I'll put it in forward. And that clears out the glue. And that way I'm not influencing the direction of this hole. By getting the drill in there backwards, I'm making sure I'm preserving the edge of that hole as much as possible. Here on the tenon you can see there's some finish that's on here and a little bit of glue residue. I'll use a file to take that off. So it's back to bare wood. And it's essential to do that so that the glue has something to stick to. Otherwise, I could really have a compromised joint here. I'll show you a couple more joints here. You see here there's a gloss on the surface. This joint's been loose and rubbing so long that it's actually been polished. On the other end here, it's quite a different extreme. Yeah, there's some glue residue on here, but this chair looks like it's probably been refinished. It's been stripped, and that stripper went inside here. That's likely why some of these joints have become loose, because the paint strippers loosened up the glue. Okay, so all the parts are clean here. I can start just assembling this without glue. Whew, that's a really loose joint. That shouldn't go together that easily. I'll have to fix that when I put it together. Okay, that's mostly together. This one goes here, which means these two go in here. Okay, so this one's down here, and that one's also loose, and this one goes here. Okay. So now I can figure out where the location of these are, the angle I need, and I can drill the holes. The easiest way to measure this is off of the bench. So I'll just take my square here. So here I'm at 5 3/4 to the center here, and that's what I'll mark over here. Now if you look straight at the chair, you'll see that these legs are flared slightly. I put my square here and you can see that. So what I need to do is get these lined up on the mark, and then use my T-bevel to figure out the angle. So what I want is the center of this at the right height, and then the center of the leg. Now I'm going to clamp down the leg so it's nice and secure. And I'm going to be using this spindle here to tell me what this angle is. And then the bevel, the T-bevel here, is going to tell me what angle I need to keep it at this way, back and forth. So that's the right depth. I just need to dry fit the piece in here, then I can drill the other one. So we now test the fit of this one, and oh, it's really loose. Okay, so there's this one that's loose, and there's a couple others that are loose, likely due to wear, because they've been wearing so long. So I'll just put a tape flag on this, I'll mark the other ones, and show you how I tighten up a tenon like that. So this tenon here that's loose on this end is also loose on this end. I'll mark it. And I think there are two more that are loose. There's one here. This is loose, and that's where that polyurethane glue was. So I'll tighten that one up as well. I'll just continue to go around the chair, make sure there are no other loose tenons, and then we'll make those tenons thicker. What I'm doing is making some thick shavings, and I'm using poplar so I can get that thickness. So I've set it to a really heavy cut, and it takes a fair bit of force to get through this. So what I can do now is stretch out one of these shavings, and I can wrap that around the tenon, glue it on, and that will make the tenon thicker. So I'm going to use PVA here because I want a permanent bond on this. When we actually glue the joint together, we use high glue. So I just need to cover this off, get a good coating of glue on it. And then I can start wrapping the tenon. So I'll start this around here. get to this one side, cut it off with my shop scissors. And then what I want to do is work out any air bubbles, get it nice and smooth, and then I'll wrap it up with elastics to hold it all together. And I just cover these with elastics, every single part of the surface, to make sure I've got clamping pressure and I've got a good solid bond of that shaving on the tenon. I have to let these sit for 24 hours to make sure that glue comes to full strength. And I'll just put some of these shavings in this container with my elastics. Here's an example of another thick shaving I've done in the past. So I just set these aside for the next time I need them. So while this glue is curing, I also need to glue in a piece right here. It's a little sliver that's come out. So I'll just use a chisel, clean that up, and glue a little block in. The first step in using a chisel is making sure I hone it. So this is a strop. If you haven't seen me use this before, this makes sure I have a polished edge, and I've got the sharpest chisel possible when I'm working on work like this. And that is a very sharp chisel. I've got a nice tight fit here and I'm ready to glue it on. Now if I were to put this on with PVA, I need clamping pressure for that glue to work, and it's going to be very difficult to get this to stay in place because it's going to slide on that angle. So what I'm going to do is use epoxy here, and that way I don't need the clamping pressure and I can just put it in place and let it cure for 24 hours. In the meantime, I'll work on the spindle that I need to touch up. The first thing I need to do is make sure I've got a secure way to put it in the lathe. So I'll drill a hole with a Jacob's chuck, and then what I can do is squeeze it in there, use some tension to hold it in place. Unfortunately, this piece is too far off center to turn with the machine. So what I'm going to do is turn it by hand. What I do is allow the bevel of the chisel to follow the turning as I turn the wheel by hand. This is actually a good way to learn turning skills. You can see the cutting action of the chisel and how to hold it properly. With a little bit of sanding, you can see here, we've got this to the right profile. Now just a safety warning for you, if you are turning something this small, you need to support the work, either with the back of your hand or with a support that's on your lathe. I have heard of a wood turner that had one of these snap and it impaled them, and that's why I wear a shop apron. That gives me extra protection on my torso, just in case something does go wrong. Now part of the advantage of me using clean lathe, the contraption I have here for dust collection, is I don't have to worry about getting dusty, so my pockets here won't fill up. Traditionally people are wearing something like this. This is a turning smock with a very closed neckline on it, and that sheds the dust from when you're turning. But with my invention, I no longer wear this. So if you want to check out more about Clean Lathe, my invention, you can go to the Clean Lathe YouTube channel, and there you can learn about the invention and how we progress, hopefully to getting this as a product on a shelf someday. My parts are almost ready to assemble, but I need to let the glue cure overnight. Don't forget to check out the other 4 YouTube channels, but give us a thumbs up because remember, this is a competition. I can now take the elastics off these, and what I need to do is just file down any of the rough bumps I've got here, but you can see that's definitely a thicker tenon, and that'll give me a nice snug fit. Okay, so these are all smoothed out now. So what I need to do is dry fit them so that I know these are going to fit when I go to put them back together again. So this one goes here. I need the leg. It's here. Okay. So test this fit here and see how it works. Oh yeah, that's tight. A little bit too tight. So I just have to work that down a little bit with a file, and we'll have a good snug fit. And this chair is going to last for decades to come. Now on the back I need to prepare the joints here. These are called split tenons, and they're held in with a wedge. Now the purpose of the wedge is, this is the top of the seat, this is the bottom. The wedge flares this open and provides tension so that the post doesn't want to come out. This wedge here is a little bit too long, so I just need to cut it off a little bit, but it'll force that out. On this other side, what I have to do is cut the slot out so I can get a wedge in here. So I'll clean that out with a handsaw. You can see here there's a straight line, and that's the edge of the old wedge. So I'll just saw that out and clear out the passage for the new wedge to go in. You can see I've got a nice crisp line here. Now I'll just cut another one parallel to that to open up the channel. Now when I put a wedge in here, it's going to bottom out. So what I need to do is push it down until it starts to bind, and then cut it off just a little bit below that. And that way, when I put the wedge in, I've got lots of space in the slot here to push this down and drive these two pieces apart. So now you can see up close, I've got lots of room here to be able to drive that wedge in. I now just have to clean the glue off the split tenon, and this joint will be ready for glue up. If you don't have the tools or time to make wedges like this, we sell them on our website, wouldn'titbenice.ca. I'll leave a link in the video description. The next step is to go through and shape this part here. This is where I glue the block in. So I'll get out the tools, clamp this down, and get that started. Okay, around the edge there, it's all nice and smooth, so once this is painted, you won't even know that patch is there. Last part here is this one spindle. I needed to change the profile on, and it wasn't quite in the right position, so I needed to dry fit this, make sure it's at the right spot, and then we can glue it all together. I'll just use a round file to clean the glue out of the mortise, and then we're ready for a test fit. I've got all the spindles here in the right order. So the seat posts usually go in first because they're the longest. And then it's just a matter of working in the longest ones first to get them in the right spot. So you can see how this replacement spindle here is sitting a little higher than the rest. So I just have to work down the base here so I can get a little further into the seat. I think about there should do it. Now the way I work this down, I've got a mark here, is just with a carving knife. So I put that on the line and then just do a bit of a sweeping cut like this. And what I want to do is follow this all the way around. And then I'll take a file and just smooth it out. But this will allow me to get this a little further down and match up the rest of the spindles. Okay, I'll give this a test fit. Well, they're in little different spots here. This one needs to come down a little bit. This one here needs to come up. I think that needs to go down just a little bit more the way it's lining up here. So I need to work a little bit more and then I can give it a final test fit. Well, this is looking much better. These profiles here are now lining up, so this newer spindle is looking like part of the family. I'll take it all apart and we'll start gluing it up. I won't film the whole glue up process, but the one thing I do want to show you is just to make sure that you're gluing both the mortise and the tenon. So the mortise is the hole, and what I do is use hide glue on this. So hide glue, as you've seen, is reversible. So this will allow me to take apart the chair if it needs to be repaired in the future. So please don't use PVA glue on joints like this. And then on here, do the same thing. I just use the back of a paintbrush. And then on the tenon, I'll put it on as well. If you put it just on one side, the glue and the tenon will get, or the mortise will get pushed to the bottom. The glue and the tenon get pushed to the top. So by putting glue on both sides, what you're doing is making sure you've got the maximum glue coverage possible on any joint. Okay, so I've got glue on all the joints here. Things do go together easier when they've got hide glue on them. It makes them all slippery. So won't have to force anything that doesn't fit properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is clamp this with a clamp. And what that'll do is give me pressure on the base of the chair. And then we can put the wedges in. So I'm just going to put glue on one side of the wedge. That way it'll make it easier to pull the wedge out in the future if someone needs to pull this apart. So I hold on the post with one hand because what I want to do is make sure this is as tight to the seat as possible and then drive the wedge home. Did you hear the sound difference? So as it gets more solid, you get a different sound to it. So I'll wipe off the glue, I can trim that off. I'll do the same on the other side. Now I use a Japanese flush cut saw. This is one of my favorite tools in the shop. It makes quick work of trimming things like this. Now what I'll do is just get these pieces lined up. And normally what I do is glue the base right after gluing the top, but I think I just want to let these spindles sit and firm up so they're in the exact spot I want. Okay, that takes care of the excess glue, and I've got these parts on here as well. There's no point in gluing them because they are finished edges, so it's just adding screws. Now the screws that were in it are Robertson screws. They're modern screws, and that doesn't look right on an antique chair. So I've got my collection of older screws here. I'll find some that fit and use those. We're now ready for the final assembly, and I need to make sure that when I put the chair together, it's not going to wobble. And part of that is I need to take these feet off. And I've got a technique that I use to assemble the chair in a way that it shouldn't wobble. It works 98% of the time. The odd time it doesn't. But first of all, I'm taking these pads off so that all 4 feet are going to be level on my workbench at the same time. Wow, these pads are on here really well. It's rare that pads don't come off very easily. If you're interested in learning how to put on pads so they'll stick, I've got a video on that. Wow. Okay, so now it's turn the chair upside down and put all the parts together. Now, because this chair has braces on it, it doesn't want to sit like this, so I'm just using a center block to put some weight on it. And now I can put glue and all the mortises, put all my pieces together, and then stand it up to make sure I can get it level. With all the stretchers put on now, I can work on the tenons, just glue them up, and then we can put it in the chair seat. So this goes in the same way as it came out. The back legs are splayed, so they have to go on first. So I'll just get up my mallet, set them in, and then the front ones go in at the very end. Seat these with a mallet, and now we can stand it up. Now, put a board on here to protect the seat and put some weight on it. This is what helps settle down the chair, and that'll prevent it from wobbling. And now I can clamp everything up and make sure it's tight, and then clean off the glue. So everything's clamped up here. I'll let it sit and dry, but a true test of a clamp is this. If this clamp can hold on a splayed leg, it's a quality clamp. If you're looking to buy clamps like this, I put together a video testing them all out to figure out the best ones to use for furniture repair. I'll leave a link in the video description. That's a collaboration with John's Furniture Repair, one of the competitors in this contest. I'll now let this chair sit for at least 2 hours, and then I can take the clamps off. I'll take the weight off here, we'll take the clamps off, and we can take a final look at the chair. I'll leave you with one more safety tip. If you choose to make shims yourself, these are small pieces and it's difficult to make them safely. So I've got a video that shows how to make them. I'll leave a link in the video description. I hope you give us a thumbs up in this chair competition with the other YouTubers. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, click over here, click on that bell icon to get notified every time we publish a video. Thank you for watching Fixing Furniture.